And then we have Thomas Harriot, who is a very obscure historical figure, but he did a lot of seriously important scientific things and made a lot of scientific discoveries that he has never been given the honor of linking them to. One is that, now here is where this is when, your students are always saying, okay, so I forgot to put the date on my journals or my logbook or my lab book, and who cares anyway? How important is that? Well, this is an example of how important that really is. Because Thomas Harriot, on December 8th, 1610, drew these illustrations of where the sunspots were located on the surface of the sun that day. And he has an observational log, and he shows the change in the number and the location and position of those sunspots for a period of several years. So he was not the first to observe sunspots, but he was the first one to actually study them, and he did that 1 year and 4 months before Galileo started to study sunspots. Two more important people are David and Johann Fabricius. They're very fascinating people. Amateur astronomers, a father and son. They actually discovered Mira, a very famous variable star. And they also independently discovered sunspots. And they published it in this little pamphlet called, on observing sunspots and their apparent rotation with the sun. And they sold it at a little book stall, at a little book fair in Frankfurt, Germany, in March of 1611. Very obscure, not known. Kepler actually discovered this pamphlet, but by then Christoph Scheiner was the one associated mostly with sunspots, so he never did. The Fabricius father and son team never got any recognition for their contribution to sunspot research. Now Galileo, yes, he did notice them late in 1610, but so did Harriot. So which one of these people actually saw them first, we do not know. But we know that Harriot was recording them on December 8th in 1610. Galileo did not actually do any serious sunspot observations, even though he claimed he did, before April of 2012. No existing illustration, drawing, writing says that he did anything before April 2012. However, he got into a ferocious controversy with Christoph Scheiner. Now, Christoph Scheiner, in March and October of 1611, was doing some serious sunspot observations. And he got into an argument, a debate with Galileo, because Christoph was still of that worldview that was Aristotelian. It was a geocentric universe, and the heavens were perfect. So these spots had to be objects orbiting around the sun, where Galileo, of course, with the Copernican viewpoint that the universe was not perfect, that all the planets were revolving around the sun, and that those sunspots were part of the surface of the sun itself. So this, of course, Galileo won that debate. However, this set off a lot of, actually this showed that Galileo was not this sweet, kind, wonderful little person that you are taught to think of when you talk about Galileo in the classroom. It's like, oh, Galileo, he was wonderful, he did this, he did that. Well, he was also human. And he could also be very obnoxious when he chose to be. He started producing, with these people starting to publish their results about sunspots, even lunar drawings, by the way. He was not the first for that one either. He started accusing everybody of stealing his discoveries and trying to claim them for their own when they were actually his. So, but in 1630, Christoph Scheiner published the Rosa Ursina, which ended up being the standard sunspot treatise for 200 years. And in the introduction of the first volume, because he thought that Galileo was personally attacking him, he attacked Galileo. And then the fight was on for the next several years. And one reason that this was the standard for so many years, 200 years, was it happened to coincide with the Maunder minima, and there was very little sunspot activity, so very little observations and study of the sun during that time frame. So if you teach astronomy teachers absolutely love to talk about Tycho Brahe and Johann Kepler in the classroom, because these two people are absolutely so interesting in so many ways. Now, so we have the poor royal astronomer, the poor mathematician, the duel, the nose, the death, the stolen data, the possible murder, science fiction, astrology and horoscopes, and supernovas. They look like titles in a murder mystery. Well, that is part of their story. Tycho Brahe was a nobleman, and he was, by all accounts, arrogant, conceited, obnoxious. When he was still at university, he got into a duel with a fellow student over who was the best mathematician. Well, Tycho might have been the best mathematician, but he certainly was the worst duelist, because in that duel, the result of that duel is that his nose was sliced off. So he manufactured metal noses, and copper one for every day, around the house, around the observatory, silver for more important people, and gold for those special occasions at the royal court. And then he was the royal astronomer for the King of Denmark, and he fell out with him, and then later on he became the royal mathematician for Rudolph II, who was the Holy Roman Emperor in exile in Prague. So yes, that line of descent of Holy Roman Emperors in the 1600s still, I guess, for some reason, thought the Holy Roman Empire might come back and they could regain the throne. So they actually, believe it or not, exhumed Tycho Brahe's body in 1901 just to determine if he really did have those metal noses. So they did see corrosion on the bone around the nose, so they determined, yes, he really did have metal noses. But the other thing they noticed was there was a very high level of mercury in his body. Was he murdered? Was he murdered by the king because he was having an affair with the queen? Was he murdered by Johann Kepler, who was his assistant at the time, because Tycho was doing all these observations and recording them, and Johann Kepler wanted that data desperately because he was the mathematician and he wanted to develop the harmony of the spheres, and Tycho wouldn't share the data with him. So did he murder him so he could get that data? Did he accidentally overdose because he had kidney and liver issues due to his gluttony and alcoholism, and Tycho would self-medicate with mercury, which was something that happened during that period of time. So they actually exhumed his body again. They will never leave this man alone. Maybe they will now, in 2010. And just because there are forensics now, they want to determine if he did die from mercury poisoning. But they finally did release the results a few months ago, and they determined that it was not an amount that would have killed him. So they think he just died of probably kidney failure.